Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Monday. It's President's Day. It's kind of a semi-day downtown, but what a fun day. We've had a full raft of shows today, and our final show today here on President's Day is Leigh-Wai Doo, an old friend who, I know for a long time. So I don't even admit how long, a long time. Levi, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Jay, and happy President's Day.
Thank you. It's nice to see you, and I would like to take this moment to try to go through some of the photographs you brought and in a way of introducing you. But let me tell you just offhand, let me tell everybody just offhand, Levi is a retired lawyer. He went to Harvard. He's a former city council member, served for quite some time in the city council. Frank Fossey was there at the time. Is there? Okay. He is, let's see, what else? He is a xenophile, loves China, been to China. Got a great history in China of establishing relationships long before the rest of them went there, honestly. Right after the Cultural Revolution, Levi was out there doing stuff and connecting up in China. So, Levi, why don't we go to some of the photographs, and I'll hand you some, and we'll just go ad hoc at random, and you can sort of describe what you got here, and we'll zoom in on the photographs and try to get a kind of a picture of you. All right?
My goodness gracious, surfing. Let's do surfing.
Okay. This is called 52 pickup.
Yeah. Because I start with surfing in my spirit, and that's me on a very cloudy, windy day.
Oops. Okay.
But this is a sequence shot at Alamana
We
Bowl.
got to go a little slower so we can zoom in and actually see the pictures.
You hold it.
Okay, I'll hold it.
That's Surfer Magazine talking about surfing over there.
Okay, so this is Levi. What year was this, Levi?
That would have been 64.
Okay. No,
1964.
Now,
high
somewhere
school.
along the line you got handicapped. Was it?
Oh, I had polio when I was 9 months of age as a baby.
Uh-huh.
And so all my life I'm on my crutches and braces. And about 7 years ago, I'm in a wheelchair now because of post-polio, used up all my good shoulders and hands, and enjoying life with these power
It never
wheelchairs.
stops you much, though, did
Huh?
it? It never stops you.
Oh, no. And now, one of the good things is when you set a goal, there are many different paths to the same goal. So I learned that through surfing. I couldn't stand up and surf, but I loved surfing, lying, leaning, and that spirit of, figure out another way that'll suit you. And that applies to everybody and everything. So if the regular path to reach your goal is not a easy one, try another path. And, well, I wanted to be a beach boy. I couldn't be a beach boy. So I wound up going to law school.
Beach boy, law school.
And then
Right.
after going to law school and graduating, I helped start the UH Law School. That's me here as
Can we see it?
assistant
Let's
dean.
hold it a little further up.
And-
Okay. Let me do this. Okay, can you get it? Okay, that's Levi on the ground, right behind Justice Richardson, who is giving the invocation, I guess.
Yeah, Dean Hood. And then meanwhile,
What year was that?
that would be 1976, graduating the first class of the UH Law School.
Oh, wow, that was a historic class for sure.
And in the process, I built my home on Molokai at Honolulu, Levi, right on top of the best surf spot
Okay,
on the east end.
okay, see the map? That's Molokai, and on the top of that mountain, or the hill, I guess, is Levi's house. You still go there?
No, with post-polio, I sold it.
Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, my heart is there.
Yeah, those are the days. huh?
But I courted my wife, and so this is our family that we produced together. And
It's like you're having a lot of fun in this picture.
it was a lot of fun.
And that's your daughter over to your left?
I'm sorry?
That's your daughter?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my daughter. She's in London,
And
a stockbroker.
Couple of
My
sons there?
youngest son is in South Korea teaching science to primary, middle school kids, and my oldest is in Minnesota. And then I ran for Honolulu City Council. I got in, but while I was there, I said, you know, we don't have any relationship with any place of communist China. So we need to build friendship between these two very populous countries, and China came to be the number 2 economically. And so I flew over to San Francisco, met with the Consul General Hu Dingyi. He recommended Hainan amongst others, and as China's experimental region, a region that's their laboratory to see which parts of the American system and Western system would fit with the psyche.
You mean like the hospitality industry?
Well, for them, very much so, because it's on the same latitude of Honolulu and Maui.
Yeah.
You can bracket it for there.
This is before they had built Hainan up as a tourist destination.
That's right. At that time, they had no tourists. It was a backwater of Guangdong province, but it became the first of our sister islands and sister city relationships. I had, through the Pearson Program Foreign Affairs Office of the State Department, got Hal Meinheit as a rising star of the middle rank of the State Department to work for our city council to create that bridge. And we went through everything and opened up the sister relationships. And so this was our sister city signing 30 years ago. And
we put that in perspective. That 30 years ago would have made it the middle 80s. That would have been at the tail end of the Cultural Revolution. These guys weren't kidding. That's quite something. In those days, that was a great achievement.
It was and is, and in hindsight, we say, wow, wonderful, because China's really opened up. But imagine if China had not opened up. You know, I might have been painted with a brush of being pinky or something. President's
That's an
Day, mind you.
interesting point. You know, there's Leigh-Wai, he's fooling around in China with the communists.
Yeah, but they were great people and very open-minded. And so in the process, being a lawyer and having helped start our law school, I encouraged them and us to exchange information on our legal systems. You know, they wanted to learn from us. We didn't particularly want, but out of respect and mutuality and face savings, we had a seminar on the principles of Chinese and American law in the early 90s. This was the first one. We're now planning the 5th one. And it is said by the Guangdong Foreign Affairs Office that this was probably in all of China the first legal exchange between China, any place in China, and the United States.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, I was involved in something called the Honolulu, Shanghai, or Hawaii-China Legal Exchange Program starting 5 or 6 years ago. Followed this with Roger Epstein out of Cade Schutte.
Yeah, great.
But this preceded that by decades and decades.
Yeah.
Still going on.
Still going on. We hope to have the next one this year, 2015. So I'm cultivating the appropriate letters and exchanges for their People's High Court in Guangdong and Hainan to extend an invitation to our Chief Justice here, and Mark Rucknewald, as well as our bar president, Greg Markham. It'll happen, I believe. And this will mark the 5th year of the exchange, and it's particularly significant because on December 1st, the new president of the People's Republic of China, President Xi, declared Constitution Day, that China, under his reign as president, will enforce the rule of law. You know, try to eliminate corruption and And that was the buzzword when I was there
Sure.
in early December. You know, everybody's gonna cross their T's and dot their I's and be appropriate.
Knocking wood, yeah.
Yeah. So this year could be very significant in that regard.
Well, let's take a moment to talk about what it means to be, to have an exchange program like this. So they come, and there are various meetings, festivities at the law school, I imagine, and elsewhere in the community. They get to meet the Chinese community, for example. They get to meet the legal community. They get to break bread, a lot of bread.
And then what happens after they go to the United States, the mainland, and then go back to China?
Oh, they go to the mainland also.
Yes, and meet the American Bar Association folks
Very cool.
and others. And then for Hainan, for example, they went back and they rebuilt their court building, the Intermediate People's Court there, as a replica of the U.S. Capitol.
What, is the United States Supreme Court?
No, not the Supreme Court, but the Capitol,
building.
the
Oh, how
Congressional
interesting,
building.
how interesting.
Complete with false fireplaces. It's so warm there, they didn't need the fire, but they had the fireplace layout without the chimney.
Is it the same size?
Huh?
Is it the same size?
Yeah, I think it's
probably,
pretty
The
big,
Chinese know how to do things big.
and out of marble too.
Wow.
And they held the National Conference of the Judiciary in that building the year after it opened. And the head of China's judiciary said, all the rest of China should take the example of Hainan and rebuild their court structures. So step by step, we are having influence.
So it's changing everything, really.
You know,
Because their court system was a different animal
Yeah.
for a long time, and it occupied a different place in their society.
yeah, and we had over 200 years to develop our system that we feel comfortable with, but China, I think, they're only 60 years out of the revolution.
So they warmed to you when you suggested this possibility of the exchange, of taking a look at the rule of law, of traveling around the country, of examining the American court system, trying to bring it into their own. So why, what was persuasive about what you said? Had you just hit it at the right moment in history? Was it something about you? Wait a minute. I'm just thinking. Harvard Law School, city council member, and you're related to Sun Yat-sen.
Yeah,
Those three things are compelling.
yeah.
Let's talk about Sun Yat-sen.
Wonderful man. Wonderful man that claimed to have been born in Hawaii. He felt so comfortable in Hawaii, having come here at the age of 11 and going to the Iolani School and then later Punahou for a semester, and seeing that China could not persist under its 4,000 years of a dictatorship of a monarchy, and that it had to change through revolution. So Sun Yat-sen learned a great deal from the American system as well as the British system of a republic. And after he had caused the revolution of 1911, China fell into a warlord period, and then he had to try to reunite China. And Americans from Hawaii played a very major role throughout that entire process. He called the overseas Chinese as the cradle that caused the revolution.
They supported him.
With money, with ideas, and most importantly, with their lives, with their efforts. Amongst them was my grandfather on my mother's side.
Hold that thought, Levi.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break.
Good.
Come back. We're going to talk about your grandfather. There's so much to talk about. Really, this is an extraordinary discussion, and I'm so happy to be here with you. This is Leigh-Wai Doo. He is a retired lawyer, former city council member, Frank Fossey, and a Sinophile, which you're hearing about now. We're talking about making friends with China here on ThinkTech Asia. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Leigh-Wai Doo, a retired lawyer, former city council member, and a Sinophile, and we've been studying his travels and exploits and achievements in dealing with China, even at a time shortly after Westlake, actually, when it had just opened up and there was all this fertile possibility, and Levi was there. So, you were talking about your father as a relative of Sun Yat-sen.
Not so much a relative, but inspired
Inspired.
by Sun Yat-sen. As Sun Yat-sen always was short on money to cause the revolution. And so he appealed to all overseas Chinese, but amongst them was my great-grandfather,
His name
a
was?
citizen of the Kingdom of Hawaii before he became an American citizen, Young Ahin, and who had prospered in Hawaii. And Sun Yat-sen said, save China through aviation. And grandfather supported his youngest son, Sen Yat, to learn aviation at Curtis Aviation School in Buffalo, New York. Now, today there's a couple million pilots licensed under that. Well, he was license number 416.
Okay.
Hawaii's
We have a
first,
picture of an airplane.
Hawaii's
here
first
somewhere.
land and seaplane pilot.
Yeah,
There
there it is.
So he helped Sun Yat-sen retake Canton, and he and the general. And as a consequence of that, Sun Yat-sen was able to reunify China in the long run.
So this is part of the revolution.
Yeah, the continuing part of the revolution. And they call it the Generalissimo period. That's his picture, and
It's your grandfather.
yeah, and the saying alongside of that is aspire or
Aspire to the sky.
that's it.
It's not that I can read the Chinese, but do you speak Mandarin, by the way?
Huh?
Do you speak Mandarin?
No.
Okay.
Well, my stomach does. My tongue
That's
is
the
not.
right choice.
Yeah.
But I want to step back for a minute, though, Levi. One of the things we talked about in the break was the fact that Sun Yat-sen was a China hero. He had achieved a successful revolution in 1911. He was and is known in every corner of the country. How do they see him? How does the country see him today? I know this is relevant because this helped you establish the relations that you established. What do they see him as? What do they see Hawaii as right now today?
30 years ago was quite different than the way they see him today. 30 years ago, Sun Yat-sen was treated like another one of many attempts of overthrowing the monarchy and failing generally. And 30 years ago, the feeling was it was Mao Zedong that created the new China. But I'd say about a dozen years ago, we felt the shift occurring where Taiwan respected Sun Yat-sen, China wanted to be closer to Taiwan. China had opened up to the international world, and Sun Yat-sen espoused the three principles of the people. And And with that, they saw Sun Yat-sen as I think, an acceptable founding father to unite all people in the world to the new China, including Taiwan, including those in Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia. You know,
Does that make him more venerable than Mao himself?
different time and period under circumstances, yes. I was completely surprised when I sat in the Great Hall of the People and saw Hu Jintao speaking, and in the background was Jiang Zemin, and the portrait on top was only Sun Yat-sen.
Oh, how interesting.
Not Mao Zedong, which often I would see side by side.
Yeah.
But this time was only Sun Yat-sen.
Okay, so a couple of things. Go ahead.
Importantly, Sun Yat-sen will unite as a global person a lot of support and identity to China as a kind of a global citizen
Yeah, goes beyond
that was educated and raised in Hawaii.
right here.
Right here.
And supported in the revolution from right here, too.
Absolutely.
So a couple of things just to get it straight. By, say, 1911, to use that year as a benchmark, there was a substantial Chinese community here in Hawaii. And they had been here since the 1840s.
Yes.
They had been on the plantations at first, and then they came into the city and began to make some money and began to get some control of things. And by 1911, they were a force, a political force and an economic force. We're not talking about plantation mentality here. We're talking about educating your kids at Harvard. We're talking about buying land. We're talking about building banks. This is pretty serious, even by 1911. So when they wanted to help him, Sun Yat-sen, they could do that. They could provide funds, they could provide leverage, and he needed it because this was a serious revolution.
With caution, they could, because
Go ahead.
the Manchu dynasty also had a consulate here, and they had their spies, and they were seeing who was supporting Sun Yat-sen, and their families could be persecuted in China.
Oh, how dramatic.
And these bad revolutionary folks could have lost their head
Yes,
if they were kidnapped and taken back to China.
which could happen.
And so it was not an easy goal. And so we have very few photographs of Sun Yat-sen in Hawaii, or
Nobody
the
wanted to be
supporters
seen,
in
yeah.
Hawaii,
Yeah, how interesting.
because it puts their family members at risk. Mind you, the Manchu dynasty until the revolution was still in power. And
Now, do you know that the Hawaii Chinese community at that time was, although they didn't, they weren't public about it, they were supporting him. I mean, that was their
not
inclination.
universally.
Not universally.
Not just as when America undertook its effort as a revolution, there were many supporters of the British government in our America. And so choosing sides could have been risky. And people did it surreptitiously as well.
I imagine a revolution like any other revolution was a bloody revolution. This was violent. It was happened in many places in China. It wasn't safe, and therefore, you were at risk if you were involved. Did Hawaii Chinese people go there physically to help him out?
Oh, there was quite a number of Hawaii Chinese did that, and grandfather Young Sin Yat went. He took Sun Yat-sen's first name in reverse, by the way.
Ah, interesting.
Sun Yat-sen, so he went Sen Yat, Young Sin Yat. So that's how endeared he was. He was the son of a millionaire, made his money in Hawaii, and he chose to leave his family behind, my mother, to be raised in Hawaii and go and fight in China and ultimately die at the age of 31 in China. But he's not the only one.
And they're not in the revolution.
Pardon?
But Not in the,
for trying to unify China in the Republic period.
Okay. Oh, that's,
And what drives a person to leave a comfortable life and family behind and say, there's a principle that's greater? And my mother always talked about, oh, she never knew her father, why did he leave me behind, and that type of thing. But she understood.
yeah.
Many other Hawaii people. We all know Louis Kwan, and his ancestors did that. We know Maripana, and his ancestors did that. The Chuna Fong, which is the Magoon family, their ancestors did that. So there were many, many people that sacrificed and went overseas to try to create a Republican form of government.
Why? Was this was a noble purpose? The idea was to create a better form of government in the country from which their families had come. They wanted to go back and fix things, and they came at it from that principle.
And the principle was, if you had a king, and the king had absolute authority, loss of freedom. So we rebelled, Americans. But add on to that, the king and the emperor dowager was so weak they couldn't control the foreigners coming in and carving up China and stealing its resources and imposing opium, making drug addicts out of the Chinese. All of that shame, that loss of face, that destruction of culture, demoralization, unless you stood up, unless you had the integrity and the discipline and the pride to say, give me liberty or give me death.
There's an expression
That's what
in
it was.
Mandarin, something about stand up China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when you hear their Chinese national anthem, whenever the Chinese win an Olympic thing, you hear the melody go up. You know what it means?
Very inspiring, actually.
You know what it means in English? It means in English, stand up, stand up. Do not be a slave to foreigners.
Really? Does it say foreigners there?
Yeah.
Oh, my, interesting. This was the time, 1911 was the spheres of influence.
Well,
There was a
that-
lot of abuse going on. It was unfair.
That song it actually came about in opposition to the Japanese coming in. It was a battle song. But that feeling of the carving up of China as a melon by the Western European powers and Japan had long been running. So the communists had taken that war song as a national anthem.
Just for interest, if you go to Shanghai right now today, that was the area that was carved up, among others. If you go to Shanghai right now today, there's a place in Shanghai called Chinatown. You think of the absurdity of that. There's a place in Shanghai called Chinatown, and that's because that was the only place left. All the European powers had taken the rest of Shanghai and carved it up, and they left this one, area in the city called Chinatown. We'll be right back after this short break in our conversation with Leigh-Wai Doo, retired lawyer, former city council member, and Sinophile. We are finding out so much today. We'll be right back here on ThinkTech Asia.
Aloha, my name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com. We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Leigh-Wai Doo, a retired lawyer, former city council member, and Sinophile, and an old friend from the 60s, I think, actually, Levi. And we're talking about making friends with China. But one thing that we have to cover in this program is a discussion of the will of Do Yuen Sing. Who was Do Yuen Sing to you?
Oh, Do Yuen Sing's my bloodline, my lineage. Well, that is the connector of me going back 3,000 years of DNA, my identity of name, who they married, what work they did, and where they lived, all the way down to his coming to Hawaii. He came to Hawaii when he was about 16, so he probably never finished high school, and he worked hard. I brought with me his will, which I'm so proud of. I've never met him because he died before I was born, but roughly paraphrasing, correct me if I'm wrong, on his page 16 of his will, he said, "In concluding this, my last will and testimony, I wish to leave a few words of advice to my children and heirs. I wish to remind them that I came as a young man to seek my fortune, and with the help of my beloved wife, now deceased, I leave to them a modest estate. And more importantly, I leave to them the esteem of the people of the community. I beseech them to always conduct themselves as to be worthy of the family name, and to work industriously and honestly, and to help one another in times of stress. Finally, I bid them to lend a helping hand to the needy relatives of in China, particularly of my deceased wife." Am I close to it?
You were very close. You get a high grade on that one, Levi. That's what it says.
So,
It's a remarkable document.
Yeah, we all have done lots of wills and read lots of wills, but for a first-generation immigrant to have written so well and so sincerely, and leaving words for descendants yet to come, I think it's remarkable.
It is.
It is remarkable.
Never seen a will like this.
No.
This is really, I mean, usually it's so mechanical, and the language comes from somewhere else, and they don't really express how they feel, and they don't pass anything on, of philosophical value to the next generation. This is a will that lives forever. Yeah.
And he was a very community-minded person. During the great famines in China and the floods, he raised money to send to famine relief and things. He helped start the Pololo Chinese Home in 1897, which became the oldest Asian-originated care home in the United States. He did that with 4 others initially, and he started several language schools. He was president of the usual societies here. So he left a very good legacy, but the greatest of which was his honesty. Besides starting a clothing store, he started a bank, and ultimately became American Security Bank, which 11 branches were bought up by First Hawaiian Bank today, and he helped save City Mill, so he was chairman of the board of City Mill Lumber Company with CKIE, who was his neighbor right on Baratania Street, right next to the Honolulu Academy of Arts.
I was telling you, I was there in that house. I think I met him. He would have been alive in the 60s.
No, he was.
Oh, I met someone else
no,
then,
yeah.
yeah. This will is dated December 27th, 1939. Here, take a flash on it. It's typed at that time, signed and attested to at that time. And here we have a most remarkable will. It tells you so much about the Chinese community here and the history and the connection with China.
Yeah.
So I want to sort of wrap around this for a minute and say, you have been in the center for a long time, for your whole life, of watching the way the Chinese community in Hawaii is connected to China, the way it has flourished. A lot of people from the Chinese community here have left town. They've gone to the mainland, settled there. How do you see it these days? It's certainly a very powerful and culturally strong group of people. How well connected is it to China now?
I think China realizes, and we should realize, that we're at a tipping point. Hawaii is at a tipping point, China's at a tipping point. So it's very meaningful that its president, Xi, is proclaiming that he's going to end corruption as best he can and to develop China under the rule of law. And it's very meaningful that we can lend a helping hand to say you have a friend that wants to be supportive of your efforts to integrate China with the rest of the world as friends, as sisters. And so we now today have a global economy, a global finance, global entertainment. We're coming to global culture, and I hope in short order we'll develop global citizenry. And that Hawaii has a special role, being as diverse as we are with so many other cultures, and acceptance and tolerance and aloha kekahi kekahi, loving one another, that we can use our gift, that gift of relationships, of building closeness in an informal atmosphere that will make it easy for a nation as China and the United States to come together, to malama each other, to really care and nurture, rooted in the Hawaiian culture, but coming forward to a new international society for the world. You know, we talked about Sun Yat-sen having claimed to have been born in Hawaii. Well, Barack Obama, we know, has been born in Hawaii. 2 presidents born in Hawaii. And 2 presidents reflecting the 2 great powers of the world. Wouldn't it be wonderful if their centers were homed in Hawaii, Kaka'ako no less,
A
side
library,
by side,
perhaps, yeah.
side by side,
Yeah.
you know?
That would be something.
It'll be an informal window for communication, so that as politics goes ups and downs and sometimes they knock heads at each other, informally, just like sister city relations, informally we can discuss things quietly without publicity. And China could kind of come forward and say, we'd like to have a program on this topic. They wouldn't say it to the Obama Center, but they might say it to the Sun Yat-sen Center, and so forth. Great opportunity exists for Hawaii to use the gifts that it has of bringing aloha, bringing the closeness of people to be united. And that's, you know, Reverend Akakas spoke so much of that. And that aloha is the Spirit of God seeking to unite that which is separated. And interestingly enough, in Reverend Akaka's living room, other than his family, there was only one picture of on his living room under the lamp, and that Madam Sun Yat-sen and him together, Sung Ching Ling. And I thought, oh, how remarkable. And
It is remarkable. He was a remarkable man. And this is an article that you wrote only a few years ago.
on the 50th anniversary of us becoming a state,
Yeah.
because Reverend Akaka is the cause of us being named the Aloha State. That was his sermon at that time.
So given that, Levi, this is my last question for you. Given this extraordinary, you know, immigration that happened between China and Hawaii, and the presence and involvement of the Chinese community in the development of the state, in all aspects of the development of the state, it's, you know, it's not too far from 200 years, almost 200, you know. In 2040, it'll be 200 years, something like that. And given the fact that, you know, we have this connection with Sun Yat-sen, and he and therefore we are known in every corner of China. And given what you were talking about is that we have a great legacy out of all this, a destiny. The question is, and a possibility, an enormous possibility, how do we play the card? What do we do now to achieve what you were dreaming of? You know, how do we make that come true?
Several things. Have our law seminar this year. Secondly, recognize that our name is Sandalwood Mountain to 1.3 billion people today. So we should recognize sandalwood, Hawaii's Iliahi, as the tree of Honolulu. Thirdly, young Sun Yat, the pilot, has 2 schools started by Madam Sun Yat-sen in China, Zhongshan. And I am suggesting that those 2 schools, and so far the Chinese have said yes, have an English-speaking contest. And the winner of those contests will receive an award from our governor or mayor, just as Sun Yat-sen in Hawaii received an award from King Kalakaua when Queen, then Princess Liliuokalani was in the audience. Zhongshan, the city, says they want to do that for the whole city in 2016. And why 2016 is so important is that is the 150th anniversary of the birth of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. We know he was born in Zhongshan City, Chuihang Village, just next to Macau. But he has an affidavit saying he was born in Ewa Beach, Oahu.
I'm sure that was useful.
Very useful to travel and raise money for the revolution. So if we position ourselves this year, 2015, it'll raise the eyebrows of China and the awareness within China of Hawaii's role. And from that, when they celebrate the national birthday throughout all of China and the world, they'll pay attention to Hawaii.
Don't stop, Levi. Keep doing it. I know you're working hard on this.
Yeah, it's fun. It's an avocation.
An avocation from a sinophile. Retired lawyer, former city council
I'm a
member.
kama'aina. That's what I like to be
Kama'aina,
recognized
okay.
And a surfer.
And a surfer. Don't forget the surfer part. Leigh-Wai Doo, here we are on ThinkTech Asia, talking about making friends with China. It's been a long friendship. Thank you so much, Levi.
A pleasure, Jay. Always.
Always.